Beautiful. We are in good shape. We have all our unique values. And of course, I can remove the console log and we'll start by displaying all the categories. And we'll do that by using the buttons. So in here, let's go with comment and I'll say categories. We will copy and paste here and off categories. And then we'll just start by setting up, of course, our return. And then as far as return, we're going to go with our form control. So form control, again, that is the div for the styling. And then inside of this form control, let's set up a heading 5 and let's say category. And then right next to that, there's going to be a div. And in here, I would want to iterate over my categories array, the unique values that we're getting back from get unique values function. And then for every category, I would want to display the button. And I purposely set up the filter to have different values. So here, notice we have the text input. So essentially input. Then we have some buttons. Then we're going to have some select as well as more buttons. Then the input range as well as the checkbox. So again, I purposely set it up so you can see the unique values. I didn't see the point of repeating the same stuff multiple times because you need to understand the general setup. And then you can always set up, for example, companies as buttons or categories as select input. That's really up to you. I just need to show you the general setup for each of them. And then you can make up your mind however you would want to display your filters. And as you can see over here, I have a nice typo. So let me save this one. And then inside of this div, like I said, I'm going to iterate over my unique categories. So of course that is in my variable categories. We're going with map. And then in order to speed this up, I'm just going to say that each category will be represented as C. And then I'm also looking for the index over here. And then for every category, I would want to return a button. And then for the key, I'll set up my index. And then there's going to be more values. But for the time being, let's just say that I would want to display my category inside of the button. Let's save that one. And there it is. Now, of course, we should see the buttons. But there's a few things that are missing. First of all, there's going to be a class name for the active one. So once I click on a button, I want to display the one that matches the state value actually as the active one. Check it out. In a complete one, notice as I'm clicking, I get this underscore. And that's what I would want to add. So that way I can show the user, well, which category is actually in the state right now. That's number one. And then, of course, we also need to have the on click, where every time we click on a button, of course, I would want to run my update filters. Remember, that was very, very important. So let's go here where we have the opening tag for the button. So that one will stay the same, the return. However, in the opening tag, there's few values that I would want to add. First of all, on click, it's going to be update filters. And don't worry, there's going to be a little bit more code in a function because for the buttons, it's going to be a little bit different than the input. And I'll cover that in a second. So on click, I would want to run my update filters. Now I do want to pass in the name though. And if for the input, the name was text, now for every button, it needs to match to what? To category, correct? Because this is the value that will change from the filters component. So that's why where we have the button, let's go with name attribute. And this one needs to match. So we're going to go with category. Now I also would want to add a type, and type will be equal to a button. So we have on click, we have type, we have name. And then lastly, I would want to set up my class name, active class name, if they match. If my state value, the category that is coming from the state, matches the individual category. If that is the case, then the button gets a class name of active. Essentially, what you can see here is the border. So that's why we add that border. So by default, they're right away styled using styled components, but then the active button gets that class of active. And again, something we have already done quite a few times throughout the course. So I'll just set up my template string and then my expression. I'll say if the category that is coming as a state value matches to my category. However, I do want to set it up to be lowercase because there is some casing differences. So say to lowercase for my individual category. If that is the case, if they match, then this button gets the class of active. And then if it doesn't match, well, then of course we just get the class of null. So essentially we don't have it. And then since in my state default value is all, that's why the all button gets it. Now there's one gotcha in the filter context. And that gotcha is following. If we scroll down, I guess, and we look for update filters, what are we doing over here? We're checking for the name and then the value, correct? Now, the gotcha is that when we have a button, we cannot access the text inside of the button since that's where I have my category as far as the value. So I cannot go with button and then that value. It doesn't exist. I cannot access it that way. But the thing is, I don't want to set up my whole functionality differently. I'm already nicely passing in the payload and I have the name and then the value. So I wouldn't want to go to my reducer and start adding if statements. So if it is a button, then I would want to do something else. I would rather want to do it right here in my function, in my update filters. Now, first, let me show you how our application is going to go bananas, and then I'll show you the fix. So again, as always, I'm going to do that on a bigger screen. So nicely notice I have this value of all. So this is the active one, and I can clearly see that in my components since my filters, of course, is right now the category of all, correct? So that works. Now, the problem is going to be the once I click on one of the buttons, my application will go bananas. Why? Well, because I cannot access that value. So notice once you click, now the category is actually equal to an empty string. Now, I don't want my category to be equal to an empty string. I want my category to be equal to either all, bedroom, office, and you can see the rest of the categories. And again, the reason why is that happening, if we console log the value here, if we go and let's say we refresh, we have our console. Once you click, notice this is going to be empty value because we cannot access the value in the button using the dot value property. That was possible in my input, but not in a button. So in here, since I wouldn't want to change this code or the code in filter reducer, I can simply go with if name is equal to a category. Then I know that, of course, I'm clicking on a button. And if that is the case in vanilla JavaScript, there is a text content property. And the way we set this up is value is equal to event target and not the value property, but actually text content property that gets me the text that is inside of the button. And then once we save and once we navigate as always to the bigger screen, notice I have my reducer, I have filters, category right now is equal to all. But then once I click on the next one, there it is. Now my state value is bedroom, and I can clearly see that in the categories as well because this is the active one. And again, let's just double check that everything works. We have our filter reducer. Let's scroll down and let's just see whether we are calling filtering products after we click on a button. That is very important because, again, if this doesn't work, then there's going to be problems later. And as you can see, every time I click on a button, I am invoking filtering products, which is just beautiful. So now, of course, we can set up our next filter.